He was the enemy, but his act of compassion rewrote the very definition of love. He was left for dead on the side of the road, but the one person who stopped was the one person no one expected to. I often walked the road that led from Jerusalem down to Jericho. It was a treacherous path, twisting through desolate, sun-scorched hills. It was known as the Way of Blood for a reason. Bandits and robbers made their homes in the rocky crevices, preying on the travelers who were often alone and unprepared. My disciples and I knew the path well, and so did everyone else. It was an accepted part of life. Travelers understood the risks, took precautions, and prayed for a safe journey. This was the ordinary of that time and place. My eyes, however, did not see the world through the same lens as others. They saw the hearts of men. I saw the weary traveler, a man of simple means, likely a merchant or a pilgrim, who had set out on his journey with a hope for a new beginning. He was a son of Abraham, a man of faith who would have recited the law from memory and taken great comfort in the rituals of the temple. His life was a quiet, predictable rhythm, defined by the law that guided his every step. He was an ordinary man in an extraordinary land, living a life of routine and obedience. He had a family who waited for him, a home that needed his return, and a future that felt certain. But I knew the road held more than just physical dangers. It held spiritual ones. It held the danger of hearts that had grown cold, of minds that had become so fixated on a rigid interpretation of the law that they had forgotten the very purpose of that law: to love God and to love your neighbor. The man on the road was simply a man, and the ones who would come after him were simply men. Their hearts were the real landscape I was navigating. The road, with its bandits and its dangers, was a perfect stage to reveal the true condition of the soul. I knew that the man's journey, which he believed was just a simple trip, was about to become a lesson for the ages. And so, I watched as the ordinary traveler set out. He was not a king or a prophet or a great leader. He was just a man. He had a journey to make, a family to get back to, and a life to live. He did not know that his life, in its quiet ordinariness, was about to be changed forever, not by a great event, but by the quiet, simple choice of another ordinary man. He did not know that his life, in its pain and its brokenness, would become a profound and timeless parable. The crack in the ordinary came not with the sound of a robber's blade, but with the silence that followed. The traveler was set upon by thieves, a swift and brutal act that left him beaten, stripped of his clothes, and left for dead. He lay there, his body broken and his life ebbing away, a victim of a world that had forgotten its humanity. The sun beat down on him, and the stones of the road offered no comfort. He was utterly alone, his hope now as shattered as his body. And then, the first traveler came. He was a priest, a man who lived his life in the sacred rhythms of the temple. He was coming down the road, likely on his way back to his home in Jericho after serving his time in Jerusalem. He saw the man on the ground, a body broken and bleeding. He saw the clothes torn from him, the signs of a brutal attack. He saw a man in desperate need, but he also saw something else. He saw the possibility of a body that was dead or dying, and the law that forbade him from touching a corpse. A priest who touched a dead body would become ritually unclean, unable to serve in the temple. His duty to God, he believed, outweighed his duty to a suffering man. His mind, steeped in the law, made its calculation. He did not ask, "How can I help this man?" He asked, "How can I avoid defiling myself?" He was a man of the law, and in that moment, the letter of the law was more important to him than the spirit of compassion. He passed by on the other side of the road, and the silence that followed was a deafening sound to my ears. The first crack had appeared. Then came the second traveler. He was a Levite, a man who served in the temple, a man who assisted the priests and understood the sacred order of things. He, too, saw the man lying on the ground. He came close, perhaps out of curiosity, or perhaps out of momentary pang of conscience. He saw the man's pain, the blood, the hopelessness of his situation, and he, too, made a calculation. He saw the same dilemma as the priest. He, too, was a man of the law, and his life was bound up in its rituals. To help would be to risk his own purity, his own position, his own carefully constructed life. And so, he too passed by on the other side. His choice was a testament to the way fear and self-preservation had become more powerful than love. The crack had widened. Two men, both defined by their proximity to the sacred, had just chosen to ignore a desperate need. Their ordinary had failed. Then came the third man, a Samaritan. His very presence on that road was an act of courage, for a Samaritan in Judea was an outcast, a man hated and despised. The people of Judea, the very people who had passed by on the other side, considered Samaritans to be half-breeds, heretics, and dogs. They had no temple in Jerusalem, no shared history, no common bond. If the man on the ground had been awake, he would have likely recoiled at the sight of him. This was the breaking point. The Samaritan had every reason in the world to pass by. He could have told himself that the man on the ground was a man who would have likely spat on him a day earlier. He could have reason that to help this man was to risk his own safety. The robbers could still be nearby. To stop would be to put himself in danger. Furthermore, to help would be to touch a man who was likely dead or dying, thus making himself ritually unclean in the eyes of the law, a law he didn't even fully adhere to in the first place. He had no social obligation, no religious duty, no personal connection to this man. He had nothing to gain and everything to lose. I watched as he came to the place where the man lay. His eyes did not see a theological problem or a moral dilemma. They did not see a man of a different tribe or a different faith. They saw a man, a human being, in need. His heart was not governed by the law, but by compassion. This was the moment of profound choice, the moment where he had to decide if he would be a man of his culture's hate or a man of a deeper, more profound truth. This was his breaking point. He could have walked on, and no one would have blamed him. In fact, most would have expected him to. But he didn't. He stopped. His heart, which was not bound by the rigidity of the law, was broken by the sight of the man's suffering. The love of God that had been taught to the priest and the Levite had somehow taken root in the heart of the one who was considered an outcast. The breaking point was not a moment of despair, but a moment of courageous and selfless compassion. His choice was a quiet act that would resound for all of eternity. The moment the Samaritan chose to act, the world of the ordinary was fundamentally shifted. The man, who had been left for dead, was no longer a victim. He was a recipient of a love that he could not have imagined. The Samaritan knelt down on the dusty road, unconcerned with the blood or the dirt or the ritual impurity. His only concern was the life of the man before him. He pulled out his own supplies and began to tend to the wounds. He poured oil on them to soothe the pain and wine to clean the dirt and the blood. His hands, which had likely toiled in the fields of Samaria, now worked with a gentle, focused care. He tore strips of cloth from his own tunic to wrap the man's wounds. This was an act of genuine sacrifice, for a man of his means had few tunics to spare. He then lifted the man's broken body and placed him on his own animal, a beast of burden that was likely his most valuable possession. He did not put him on a rented animal or a borrowed one. He put him on his own, and he walked alongside him, a man of dignity and purpose. The Samaritan, who had been an outcast, was now the one who bore the burden. He had become a servant. They journeyed to the nearest inn, a place of rest and safety. The Samaritan did not drop the man off and leave him there. He stayed with him, tending to his wounds all through the night. He cared for him as a brother, a friend, a neighbor. And the next morning, when it was time for him to continue on his journey, he did not abandon him. He gave the innkeeper 2 denarii, a sum that was equivalent to 2 days' wages, and told him to take care of the man. And then he made a promise that was more profound than any amount of money. Whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. The shift was complete. This was not just a story of a rescue. This was a revelation of a new kind of love. The Samaritan had not simply helped a man. He had become his neighbor. He had not just tended to his physical wounds. He had restored his dignity and his hope. The law had taught men what to do, but the Samaritan's compassion showed what it meant to be. This was a love that was not bound by tribes or nations or religions. It was a love that was defined by a simple, courageous act of the heart. The purpose of the Samaritan's act was not just to save a man's life. It was to reveal the very nature of what it means to be a neighbor. His action, so small and so private, was a living, breathing sermon on the true meaning of the law. The priest and the Levite had followed the law to the letter, but they had failed in the very essence of it. The Samaritan had ignored the law's rigid purity codes and had fulfilled its most sacred commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself. I knew that this was a perfect opportunity to teach a lesson to a world that was blinded by its own righteousness. A lawyer, a man who was an expert in the law, had asked me, "Who was my neighbor?" He was looking for an easy answer, a simple definition that would allow him to love a select few and ignore the rest. He wanted to draw a boundary around his obligations. I did not give him a definition. I gave him a story. I gave him the story of the man on the road and the Samaritan. And when I finished, I turned the question back on him. Which of these three, do you think, proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? He could not even bring himself to say the name Samaritan. He simply said, "The one who showed him mercy." And in that moment, he had found his answer. The neighbor was not someone who shared his religion or his nationality. The neighbor was the one who acted with compassion. The Samaritan's purpose was to show that a neighbor is not defined by who they are, but by what they do. He was a man of action, a man of courage, a man of love. His quiet, humble act had a greater purpose than any sermon given by a priest. It was a testament to the truth that love is not a feeling. It is a verb. It is something you do, not something you feel. He became a living example of a love that was active, sacrificial, and unconditional. The story of the Samaritan's compassion has a closing impact that transcends time and space. The man's life was saved, his body was healed, and he was able to return to his home. But the true impact of the story was not in the healing, but in the lesson. This single act of compassion became a timeless parable that I would tell to countless people. It became a moral compass for all who heard it. The Samaritan's legacy is not in the annals of history, but in the hearts of every person who has ever heard his story. His act became a symbol of what it means to truly be a Christian. It is a symbol of a love that is not bound by prejudice, but by a profound and selfless compassion. It is a story that has been told and retold for generations, inspiring acts of kindness and mercy in a world that so often forgets them. The priest and the Levite, who had been so concerned with their own purity, were revealed for what they were: men who had a heart for the law, but no heart for their fellow man. The Samaritan, who had been a man of no account, was revealed for what he was: a man who understood the very heart of God. His quiet, humble act became a light that shone for all eternity. It became a living, breathing testament to the truth that love is not about who we are, but about what we do. And in that light, we can all see the way to be a neighbor to all. My children, before you listen, I have a message for you. Do not just hear these words, but go and do them. The road is full of people who need a neighbor, and I am calling you to be one. I see the road you walk every day, filled with people who are hurt, broken, and left behind. The world has taught you to look at others with a heart full of judgment, to see them by their social standing, their beliefs, or their place in society. But I see each person not by their labels, but by the condition of their soul. I know the man left for dead on the side of the road, and I see the fear and indifference that passes him by. You, like the priest and the Levite, may often find reasons to look away. Your own busyness, your worries, or the belief that others are more deserving of your help can become a wall between you and a person in need. You may be so consumed by your own life and your own rules that you forget the very purpose of your existence. But I tell you, a life lived in fear and self-preservation is a life that is truly lost, no matter how close to the temple you think you are. The one who stopped was a Samaritan, a person despised and rejected by the world. He had every reason to pass by, to protect himself, and to stay within the boundaries of his culture's hate. But his heart was not bound by human law. It was broken by compassion. He saw a man, not an enemy, and his love was stronger than his fear. In that moment, he chose to be a living example of mercy, proving that true righteousness is not about who you are, but about what you do for others. His act of kindness was more than just a good deed. It was a revelation. He did not simply help a man. He became his neighbor, an act of true love that knows no boundaries. He bound the man's wounds with his own hands, gave up his own resources, and made a promise to return. His compassion was not passive. It was active, sacrificial, and unconditional. He showed that love is not a feeling to be talked about, but a verb to be lived out every single day. The story of the Good Samaritan is not just a parable from the past. It is a moral compass for your life today. I am asking you to be the neighbor to the people on your road, to see them with my eyes, and to act with my heart. Do not look for an excuse to pass by. Look for an opportunity to show mercy. When you do, your life will become a living testimony to the love I have for you and for the world, a light that shines for all to see. Now that you have heard my words, I ask you, do not just hear this story, but go and live it. Be a neighbor to the one who needs you most, and you will find your truest purpose. Here is a video description and 3 viral titles based on the story of the Good Samaritan.